In this video, you're going to learn how to build this in Bubble. This is a survey platform where users can come in and create their own custom surveys, manage their dynamic questions and possible answer choices, then send out their surveys to other users who can then go through the questions and record their responses. And we're going to break this all the way down. We're going to look at the database structures, the front-end designs, and all of the workflow logic in between to bring this to life. Even if you're not building a survey feature specifically, if you have any kind of dynamic form system in your app, you're going to benefit greatly from this walkthrough. We're going to go through a lot of really important fundamentals here, okay? So we're going to dive right in by taking a look at the functionality around setting up a survey. All right, so in our demonstration here, we have an admin page where a user can come in and create and manage all of their surveys. I've actually set this page up to be split between two different major views. We've got our survey list here as well as responses for any participant that's submitting their answers to the survey. Okay, this is all on one admin page. We'll take a closer look at the responses a little bit later in this video. Right now, we're going to just focus on an admin setting up a survey. So the first thing I'm looking at is a list of all my existing surveys. I can click create to generate a new one. You can see this new line got added with a untitled survey name just for now, and I can change this, of course. If I go to edit this, the very first things that I can type in here are modifying the name. I can add some custom welcome instructions, custom thank you message for when the participant is done, and I can manage all of the questions. The questions are really kind of the star of the show here because this is all dynamic where we're allowing the users to manage the questions and the format of the answers. So if I go to add my first question, we can see this is question number 1. We'll say, what's your favorite color? For now, just an example here, and I can choose what type of response I want to receive here. So this could be a single text, which would make sense for this one. They can type in whatever they want, or we can do a multi-line text where we're allowing them to type in paragraphs of text. And then we also have a scale. So if this is a numerical question, I can say, you know, rate your satisfaction level from 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. And we'll see on the front end, they have a slider that they can choose between this range. They can also do a single choice. So here I can give them options instead of them freely typing it in. So I can say, you know, blue. Let's do 2 more here. I can say red, and we'll do another one. We'll say yellow. Okay, so these will show up as the only choices that they can select from single choice, right? They can only do one of these. The multi-choice is very similar. We can still add answer options, but they will be allowed to select more than one. We can also mark questions as required, so they won't be able to move forward until they've provided an answer. And you can see I can add as many questions as I want here, like that. And you can also see that I can change the sort order of all of these questions. So let's say that I actually want the favorite color question to be number 4, and I want number 4 to be number 1. I'm going to hit save on each of these. Okay, so now they're going to move to their proper place here. Right, it gives me a little bit more control over when I'm ready to commit my changes to the questions instead of auto-saving. Okay, and of course we can delete the survey. If the survey goes, we would also want to be able to delete all of the responses that go with it. So let's now jump into the editor to take a look at all of the data structure behind the scenes and the logic to get all of the surveys set up going. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is go to the data types here. We are going to be using 3 different custom data types. We have the survey data type. So this is sort of the most parent record, you know, the name of the survey, those custom thank you and welcome messages. We do have a field here to keep track of the number of responses. This is mostly to cut down on some searches that we're doing to give the admin some feedback on how many responses are coming in on the admin page. And we have a relationship to all of the questions that have been created specifically for this survey. Okay, so this is a relationship field that is a list. So we have a separate data type here called question. Note that I do have some default values. Anytime a new survey is created, by default, we'll set the count to 0 because survey hasn't been set up yet, so there aren't any responses. And by default, we'll have this title here. That's how we were able to see, you know, when I click on create survey here, it automatically shows this new line, and I have something to look at in that field there. Okay, it's not just going to be a blank value. So that's our first data type. Then we have our question data type. Okay, so I'm going to run through these fields here. The question itself, so, you know, what's your favorite color? What is, you know, how do you rate this experience? Whatever the question is, that's what we're going to save here to this content field. This is just a text. Okay. Then if the question is going to offer some choices, so the single select or multi-select, we're going to relate this question to those possible choices. And that is also set up in a separate data type called answer option. Okay, so this is only in the event the question is a single select or multi-select. And to identify what type of question this is, we've got a field here specifically for that. I've called it type, and this is going to point to one of our option set choices right here. You can see single text, multi-line, all of those that we displayed in the drop-down for the admin. And that option set I managed over here in the option sets tab. Okay, I created this completely custom. This is not Bubble providing these for me. It's completely up to me, the types of questions, which can then dictate what type of design, what type of logic goes into answering that question. So these are the 5 that I've put together here for this demonstration. So every question has to have a relationship to a type. Okay. Then we're also going to have a yes or no field to tell us, whether this question is required to have an answer or not. If the question is a scale where, we want to present like a slider for them, then we're going to offer a minimum field and a maximum field for the user to type in. These are 2 numbers. And then every question is also going to have a sort order. So not all of these fields are going to have a value for every question. Some of them are very dependent on the question type. And then the third data type here, as I mentioned, is the answer option. This is very lightweight setup here. This is just the option itself, right? So when I said, choose from these colors, blue, green, yellow, whatever it is, the actual content that I want to type in to present to them is going to be in this field. And then we're just going to have a relationship back to the parent question. All right, so now let's take a look at the design area here of the admin page. Let's start kind of structurally first. The first group I have at the top of the screen here is this group I have called Group Tabs, and I have 2 buttons that the user can switch back and forth between looking at the surveys and looking at the responses. I'm using a custom state system for this, okay? I have a group down below called Group Main, and that group has my custom state called Tab, which is just a text value, and by default, the value is going to be Survey List. So whatever value this is going to dictate the visibility of all of these other inner groups. You can see I have 4 of them here within Group Main, and those are all of my different views on this entire admin page. Okay, they're all housed under Group Main. So for example, if I click on the Surveys button, okay, we're going to go to the workflows here. This is going to update the custom state. It's going to set the state of Group Main, my tab state. You can see I have another custom state here, which we'll talk about a little later. And the value of this custom state is survey list. I've just typed that in. So as long as I'm consistent with how I use this value, that's really all that matters. If I click on the responses button, which was the other tab, okay, you can see I've actually organized those into a folder here called navigation, just to kind of filter things out a little bit, right? So surveys was one, responses is the other. This is also changing the state value, but this time to response list. Okay, and remember by default on my group main, I've set it to survey list, so that is the starting group that the user sees as soon as they load this page. So that's this one right here, survey list, okay? So by default, this group and all of the other ones as well inside of group main, they are not visible. This checkbox here is not checked, okay? It is not going to be visible on page load. We're going to have the custom state dictate in a condition when it becomes visible. So when group main's tab, that's the custom state, is the value of survey list, which I've just typed in here, then this element becomes visible. If I go over to response list, okay, and go to this condition here, you can see it's visible under a different value. All 4 of these are visible under different values. That way we only see one thing at a time, all right? So that's our navigation system. Okay, so our survey list is a table. This is our primary element to display. You can also get this with a repeating group. So this table's structure is set up like this. The type of content is survey. My data source is a search for surveys, and I'm sorting by the name so that it's alphabetical. You can, of course, add other constraints here if you need to have more granular permissions about which survey a particular admin views. Okay, and inside of the columns, I've just displayed the rows surveys name. And then I also have the number of questions. This is pointing to the related questions field, which is a list of questions, right, tied to the survey. And then I'm counting up the items in that list. Okay, so if there's 5 items, then it's going to say 5 questions. Then I have all of my buttons to trigger a few other functions here. Let's start with the creation flow. We'll begin there because that will give us more context as we move through editing and previewing and sending. Okay, so creating a survey, when I click on that button, and this is in my surveys folder here, we're going to create a brand new survey record. Okay, so this is under data, create a new thing. and I've selected my survey data type from all of my custom data types. Notice that I haven't set anything here. I'm really just creating a blank record. Of course, because of my default, it is automatically going to have 0 saved to this field and also a temporary name. All right, that's the first thing that happens that's really the only thing that happens when I click on that button. Because a new survey now exists in the database, the table will find it in the search and then we'll automatically see it show up there as a new row. Okay, now if I go to click on edit, okay, this is going to do 2 things. Edit is first going to update the custom state, so we go to a different view. Okay, now we're going to see survey detail. That's a different group we have within the group main. And I'm going to pass data to that group detail because everything inside of that group needs to be able to reference the survey records. So we know, when we're ready to save things or create questions, it's going to properly relate back to that parent survey. So this display data action you can find under element, display data. Okay, and you'll select the group that you want to set the data source for. In this case, it's survey detail. And then the data to display, the actual survey, is going to be the current row survey. Remember that this edit button is sitting inside of a row, a table row. Okay, now because we're passing data, let me actually go over to that new group. I'm going to hide the survey list. We're going to go to survey detail. That's this one right here. This group, the type of content has to be set. If I'm going to set the data source with that display data action, I need to make sure that the type of content matches the data source's type, right? So in this case, it's survey. So this is blank here because every time I navigate to this group, I know I'm going to be overwriting this value in a workflow. And again, the condition to make this visible is when that custom state value is survey detail. That's why we're doing those 2 things when we click on edit. Change the view, set the data source. Okay, so again, most of the work here for the admin happens in this group. We have a back button. That's just another navigation function for us. When the user clicks on back, it just updates the custom state back to survey list. We have a save button, which is going to map some of these inputs that we have in this design back to the record. So let's go to that workflow here. Okay, so I've marked it in green because this is a save action, but this is going to make a change to an existing survey, right? So you can find that under your data category here, make a change to a thing. We're going to select the group survey details survey, right? That's the data source that we sent over to the group. And I'm basically going to save those first 3 inputs that we have at the top of the screen, the survey name, the welcome message, and the thank you message, just taking all of those input values here. And I'm also going to show a little alert message just to let the user know, another visual cue that it went through and it's saved. We're not going to take them away from this view. We'll keep them here, but the alert is going to be helpful for them to know that, okay, yes, your changes were saved. All right, so it was these 3 inputs that we're mapping, very straightforward. The reason we're not saving everything else when we click on this button is because we have individual saves for those questions. And because this list of questions is also dynamic, we're using a repeating group for this design, and it's easier if we save cell by cell. There are many ways to do kind of a bulk saving. They do involve some plugins, but we're going to keep this really straightforward here so you can get the fundamentals in place. So for the questions, let me scroll down to this repeating group down here. Okay, this is a separate list that we're displaying inside of our detail group. The type of content is question, and here's our data source. It's the parent group's survey, right? In other words, the detail group's related survey. And then going to the related questions, there's that list field on the survey, and sorting those questions by the sort order number. Okay, in other words, the repeating group's data source is a specific survey's list of questions, and we're going to sort those questions by the sort order. We don't want them to be sorted by the order that they were created in because the user might move them around. Okay, so that's why we're giving them the ability to custom sort. Okay. So very similar setup to the table. Both, repeating groups and tables work with dynamic lists. You need a type of content and you need a data source that is a list of that matching type right there. All right. So inside of my repeating group, I have several inputs here. We have an input for the user to type in an updated sort number, and we will pre-populate it with whatever the sort number is now. We have a field here, an input for them to type in their question contents, the actual question itself. Again, giving it an initial content, so if they're coming back to edit it, it pre-populates with this. Notice the format is text here. And then we have a drop-down that pulls from our question type option set. So it'll say single text, multi-line, single choice, all of that, scale, so that they can choose what type of question this is. Again, we do have a default value. We also want to make sure that the user always chooses something here. We can't let them leave this empty, because if we don't know what type of question, we won't know how to present the question to the participant on the other end when they're taking the survey. All right. And then we have a checkbox here for the user to select whether this is required or not. Okay. Then we have our functions here to either delete the question if they change their mind. Let's go to the delete button real quick. This is going to, actually, I'll come back to this because you can see this is a multi-step process. Let's actually start from adding a question. Then we'll go to saving and then deleting last. Okay, so adding a question is going to do the following. We're going to create a new question record, and we're going to set two fields here. The first field is the sort order. By default, we want to give every new question the last sort order number plus 1. So if there's already 5 questions, if I click on this again, I want this to be 5 plus 1. Now this is number 6, right? So we're taking the repeating group questions, list of questions, that's the data source of that repeating group element, counting up the items in that list, and then adding 1 to it. Notice that I'm not searching for questions here. I could get the same result, but that's an excessive use of workload consumption. We already have done that retrieval of that data. So we're making use of other sources we already have on the page that gives us the information that we want, right? We want to reduce searches as much as possible. And then I'm also defaulting the questions type to single text just to start them off. I could have also set this value in the data structure like I did with the survey, that untitled name, but I just wanted to show you another way to set a default. You can just do it here when you create the question. Now that the question exists, I need to relate it back to the survey. So here we're going to update the survey, which at this point already exists. So this is the parent group survey here, the parent group of this entire question container. And I'm going to modify the related questions field. Remember, that's the list field. And because this is a list field, I have list operators. I'm going to add one single item to that list. I'm not going to interrupt any other items in the list. I'm adding the result of step 1. Okay, so now we have our connection there. Now that that new question has been added to that relationship, it's automatically going to show up in the repeating group for us. Okay, so now let's look at saving an individual question. I have this check button here. So when this button is clicked, we're going to make a change to the parent group's question. And here we're going to map all the possible inputs that the user could be defining for a question, right? Because there's multiple types that they can select from for the question. And so we want to save every possible thing. Not every question is actually going to have a value for these inputs, but we're going to anticipate that any one of these could, right? It could be a scale, it could be a text content. And so we're going to do this in one action instead of having multiple actions with all sorts of conditions. We're just going to take it all here, map them to their appropriate fields. And notice the required field as well. The checkbox is checked will give us the right value. This is basically a true or false statement. So if they do check it, then this will evaluate to yes, right? The question's required equals yes. If they don't check it, then this is a false statement. This will evaluate to no. And then we're going to show that alert message. Okay, so all of those other inputs, let's open up the design here because they're currently hidden. I'm going to close this, going to scroll down. Notice I have the answer group and the scale group hidden. This is all inside of the repeating group for a single question, right? This is all within the cell. I've also added a little bit of margin to the left here so that it pushes it over and helps the user understand, with it indented that it's a part of that one question. So on the layout, I added some left margin. Let's go to the group scale here. Yeah, left margin of about 85 pixels just to shove it over just a bit, okay? So only one of these will be visible. We're not gonna have both answer options and the scale range. So they're both hidden by default. So let's go to this group. You can see again, this checkbox is not checked. And in the condition, it's gonna go off of the dropdown that we have up above. So if the dropdown's value is single choice, right? Bubble's able to populate with my custom option set choices here. Or in this case of answer choices, if the selected drop-down type is multiple choice, then we're going to show this design here. I only need one of these answer choice designs to satisfy the single choice and multiple choice. I don't have to do this 2 different times. Okay, so either one will make this visible. Whereas with the scale, this will be visible only if the drop-down's value is scale. Okay, so for the answer choices, we have yet another repeating group because the user can add in as many answer choices as they want. So I'm going to open this up here, Okay, so I have another repeating group, and this is pointing to our other custom data type, answer option, right? So the data source is now the questions related answer options. Very similar to how we had the surveys list of questions, that first repeating group. Now we have the questions list of answer options. And very similar, we have a button to add a new answer option. Okay, click on this here, and this will relate back to the question. And then we'll also relate it back at the question level and add this new answer option to the list. So there's actually a two-way connection here. All right, that's what happens when we add. It'll automatically show up in this repeating group. The only thing we have here is just an input for them to type in the answer option itself. And then if they change their mind and they want to delete, this is simply going to delete the answer option record. Okay, it's not going to delete the question, just the answer option record. So now if we work back up a little bit here, deleting the question, okay, deleting the question is going to do several things because multiple other records could also exist for this question. So we don't want to have any orphaned items if we delete the question overall. So the first thing is, if we remove one question, we need to update the sort order of every other question that came after it. I'm going to show you what I mean by that. Let me refresh the page here. And we're going to go back to our untitled survey that we were looking at there. Okay, so let's say that I delete, let's do Q1, whoops, we'll do Q1, this, we'll do Q2, and Q3. Okay, and we'll save those three items here. So let's say that I delete question 2. What should happen is that Q3 now becomes sort order 2, and the what's your favorite color actually now becomes sort order 3 because we're lifting something out. We don't want to have a gap in our sort order numbers. So I'm going to now delete question 2, just like that, and you see how those sort order values updated for us. Okay, so that's what's happening in this first action here with the delete question. We're going to take the repeating group's list of questions starting from, right, items from the index that we're currently in. So if I want to delete question 3 out of 5, I only want to modify 3 forward. I don't need to touch questions 1 and 2. And so I'm going to update the sort order field, and I'll take whatever this question's existing sort order is and subtract 1. Okay, that way it moves back by 1 in the sort order list. Then I'm going to delete any answer option records that are tied to the question. Okay, parent groups questions, related answer options. You can find these under data, and then you have delete thing, delete a list of things, make a change, right? All of your data modification actions are here. And then finally, at the very end of this flow, we're going to delete the question. We want to do that last because we need a reference to the question for all of these other items here. All right, now let's look at deleting the survey. This is going to be very similar to deleting a question where we have to have sort of a ripple effect of deleting other records as well. Now, when I click on delete here, I'm actually going to show a pop-up. This is a much bigger operation, so we want to give the user the ability to double check that this is actually what they want to do versus accidentally deleting. So we're going to show a pop-up that I have here called delete survey. So it's basically going to say, are you sure? We're going to reference the survey's name. Notice that the data source of the pop-up, and a pop-up is just another type of container, this is going to pull from the details survey, right? Because the only way we get to this pop-up is from the detail screen. So we know that they're going to have that open. That's going to have the data source we want. And so that's how we also pull in the survey name. So I have two options here. I can either say, no, never mind, I don't want to change anything. And that button is simply going to hide the pop-up. It's not going to make any changes. Or I can say, yes, I am ready to delete this entire survey. So let's go to this workflow here. This is going to do several things. Okay, let me go to this folder. Okay, first thing is I'm going to actually schedule a backend workflow to handle all of my deletion actions. Okay, because there's a lot more going on for this deletion. We want to send that over to the server side. It'll help with performance and the user's front end experience. Once that has been scheduled, we'll hide the pop-up, and we'll also change the view for the user back to the survey list. We don't want to leave them stuck on sort of a broken and empty detail page because we're deleting the survey, right? So we're going to take them back to survey list. So our backend workflow here, I've called it delete survey. We're going to run this right now. And you can see that we're sending in the parent group survey. That's the pop-up survey, in other words, the details survey, sending that record over to the backend so it knows what to work with. Okay, so let's go over to the backend workflows here. So this is the delete survey workflow I created with the internal name that I have here. I want to make sure that you don't have any spaces in the name. And I do have a parameter set up. This is how I receive a survey from my page workflow. Okay, this is just an internal ID for myself so I can identify it. And then I just made sure that the type of content was my survey data type so that I receive a whole record for the survey. So I have all of these actions to delete any record that is tied to a survey. The first one is delete all of the answer options. Usually when you have this sort of ripple effect thing, you want to delete sort of the smallest item first, and then you start working up the chain, the hierarchy, when ultimately the last thing is that final, parent record. So answer options are first. We're going to do the survey. This is, again, referencing our parameter. Surveys, related questions, related answer options, right? Any question tied to the survey that has answer options, that list will be included here. Then we can delete all of the questions tied to the survey. Then we're going to delete all of the response items and response summaries. And we haven't talked about the response data structure quite yet, but just note there's 2 data types related to it. And we're going to delete, any records within both of those data types that are tied to the survey. So I'm searching for items where the related survey equals the parameters value. And then I'm also searching for summaries with the exact same constraint there. Okay, that makes sure that ensures that we catch everything. And then finally, like I said, we're deleting the survey record overall. All right, so now there are 2 more functions here that I want to go over. We have the preview and then sending the survey to participants. So previewing is just going to navigate our user over to our survey page, which we have designed here in our demo app, right? A separate page called survey. That's where the participant lands and actually moves through the questions to submit their responses. So clicking on preview is going to just run a go to page action. Okay, you can find it under navigation, go to page, and then we'll just select our survey page. And I do want to send data. I want to send the current rows survey. You just want to make sure that that survey page has a type of content set to it as well at the page level. I'm going to switch over here real quick. Okay, this is my survey page. Notice the type of content is set to survey. So the page is sort of acting like one giant container, very similar to how we passed data to that group detail. This is exactly what we're doing just at a page level. Okay, so going back to my admin, going to navigation, that preview, right? Go to page survey, send the rows survey over there. And then for the sending of the survey to participants, let's open that back up here. This is in my list. Okay, so send is going to show another pop-up. Let's go to this workflow here. This is going to show a pop-up called pop-up send, and I'm going to display data to the pop-up because I'm coming from a table. The pop-up's not going to know which row in the table that I've triggered this from. So I do need to send data with the display data action. This is going to be the current rows survey that we're sending over there. So let's open up that pop-up. All right, remember this pop-up needs to have the right type of content in order to receive it from that display data action. So in this case, it's survey. And here I can display, instructions and things like that to receive email addresses that we want to send the survey link to. Okay, so this is a multi-line input for the user to type in as many email addresses as they want. We're instructing them to do 1 per line. This will help us with parsing them all out so we can send individual emails. And clicking on this button here, Send Survey, is going to schedule another workflow on a list so that, again, we can do individual emails per address that is typed in there. After that scheduling, you can see we're resetting the pop-up. That just clears the data source, hide the pop-up, and we're going to show an alert message. Okay, so let's take a look at this other backend workflow. So this is a workflow that I have in the backend called Send Survey. We're going to run this on a list now. This is different from the deletion, meaning I want to run this multiple times, once for every email that the user has typed into that multi-line input. So the list that I'm running on is just a list of texts, right? It's a list of email addresses. The actual list, we're going to come from the multi-line input, okay? Multi-line inputs value, and I'm going to do a split by, and I'm splitting that multi-line inputs value by a line break. So I've just hit my return key on the keyboard. Remember, because I told the user to do 1 email address per line. So I want to create a list out of that single text value, right? When I split by, then Bubble will transform it into a list structure, which is what I want in this case. If I'm scheduling a workflow on multiple items, I need to provide a list. Okay, so it's going to split everything line by line. So now I have a list of individual email addresses. I want this to run right now, current date and time. And for this one, I actually have 2 parameters. I have the survey that we ultimately want to create a link for to send them. And then I have the recipient, which is just the individual email address. It's going to be this text here because I'm running this on a list of text. So every run will receive a different value. So let's go to the backend workflow. That's this workflow right here. Here are my 2 parameters, survey and text. for the recipient's email address. And all I'm doing here ultimately is just sending an email. You can find this under email, send email there. Okay, so the 2 is going to be my recipient's parameter value. That's the email address. You can fill out, whatever details you want here for the sender name, the subject. I'm keeping this very simple because the point here is getting that recipient the link, the dynamic link to the survey page for that specific survey. And Bubble actually has a nice little shortcut operation to create a link really easily for you for a dynamic page. Our survey page is a dynamic page. Remember, we set the type of content to survey there. The admin page, on the other hand, is not a dynamic page. We're not referencing one specific thing on the admin page, but we are on the survey page. So I'm going to clear this so you can see how I built this out. I went to my survey parameter. It's being received by the page workflow when we click on that send button. And Bubble has a built-in link operator here when you come off of some record value. And then Bubble's going to say, okay, which dynamic page that is set to that data type do you want to link to? Well, I only have one in this case, and it's my page called survey. Okay, I want to be clear, you see the word survey here. This is the name of my page that I have right there. And we're also seeing survey right here. This is just, I've given the parameter the exact same name. All right, so with this link, Bubble will generate the full URL, and it'll take care of whether you're on the development version or the live version. It'll take care of it for you. And you'll see later when we go over to the survey front end that there's going to be a unique ID in the URL for this particular survey. Okay, so we know that we're looking at the right one. All right, so that is how you manage your survey setup, editing, sending, deleting, all of the admin functions behind the scenes. Hey, real quick, if you're finding this helpful, take a look at our free extended workshop over at coachingnocodeapps.com/workshop, where we'll guide you through our 4-phased approach for going from idea to app. So if you're looking for a complete start to finish guide, this is the workshop for you. We've got a lot of great stuff in there for you. So I've got the link on the screen right now and in the description below. Now we're going to look at all the functionality around taking a survey and saving responses. A lot of the stuff that you put together in the previous steps are actually going to feed right into this set of features. And you'll also see that we'll use the very same development strategies around working with the database structures, right, addressing the page layouts, and of course all of the workflows. Let's take a look. Okay, so I'm going to go through and actually take one of my surveys as a participant would so you can see what it looks like for them, and then we'll jump into the editor. So I'm in the admin page. I'm going to take this program participation survey. We're going to click on preview. It will navigate me to the survey page. Notice the unique ID here. That is for this particular survey record. So we can see dynamically things are populating from the admin settings. We have the name, we have the custom instructions. I also have set things up where they can collect some initial info, for every survey, no matter what it is, before the user begins. This is completely up to you, but I'll show you how I did this here. So let's do George at sample.com. George is our participant's name, so we'll click on begin. All right, so first thing, we obviously have a progress bar. I've only got 5 questions, so we'll be moving through this very quickly. First question here, we can see that it's required, and notice that the button is also disabled because of that. So I'm going to say USA. Now this is enabled, so I'll click on this to move on to the next question. Describe yourself. So because this is a prompt, I'm allowing the user to type in much more information. So I'm going to say, this is a paragraph like this, and we'll move into second line, third line, right? Just to show you that you can add multiple details, and it'll also expand that multi-line as needed. Click on continue. Favorite color. So this is a single option. If I choose blue first, notice the little color change there. If I change my mind, go over to green, blue sort of deselects in that appearance, and then green is now, well, green for our color change here. Click on continue. Favorite activities. This is another required one. Notice this is disabled. So this is our multi-select. I can choose hiking, bowling, reading, right? All of them are allowed to select. I can deselect them as well. But as soon as I have one selected, that is enough to fulfill the requirement, so I can move forward if I want it there. So I'll choose those 3. Click on continue. We're on the last question here. This is one of my scale questions, also required. So here, this is a number showing me what value it's at right now, but I can move the slider. It'll update the number to show me where I'm at. So let's say we give it a rating of 9. Click on finish, and it takes me to the custom thank you message. Okay. All right, so let's go over to, again, the data structure for the data types. You know what's involved here for this. So obviously the survey is still involved because that's how we know what questions to display, all of the messages. But now we're going to introduce two more data types here. We have our response summary and our response item. The response summary is going to be the parent record that has the general details about an individual response coming from a participant. So that email and the first name that I typed in before I even clicked on that begin button, those are these two fields. That was just my own choice to, offer that up here. It's completely up to you whether you want to do that or not. I also want to relate the summary to the survey that's being taken. If I have the same person maybe taking multiple surveys that I have, they're going to have a different summary for everyone. So one summary to one survey. We're also going to have a relationship to all of the response items. The item is created per question. That way we know what their response was for every individual one because they're different formats, right? It could be a scale, it could be a big paragraph of text. So those are going to be organized in their own record. So summary tied to a list of response items. We also have a response status. Again, how you want to do this is just going to depend on your requirements, but this is another option set just to show you what you could do. I have 3 different choices. A summary is in progress, submitted, and reviewed, right? Maybe an admin needs to be notified of new responses that they haven't seen yet, and then they can mark something as reviewed. And so in the option set, you can see here, this is the only other option set we have. There are the 3 choices that I set up. And then the final field here is our submission date, because that might not be the same timestamp as the creation of the summary, right? When they first begin, they may take a lot of time to do it. This can also help us understand how much time it took them from when they started to when they submitted. So the response item data type, again, this is per question. So we're going to have a relationship to the parent summary, right? So we know the email, the name, all of that. We have a relationship to the question being answered. We do ultimately have a relationship to the survey that this item is for. Technically, we have that relationship at the summary level, but this is going to help us with some logic to keep our searches down, make things a bit more efficient. This is sort of a shortcut for us. And then we have our 3 possible value fields. This is, depending on the question type, only one of these fields will actually have a value, but we do need to account for the different formats. So a single text or a multi-line text will be saved here. A scale answer will be saved here. And then a single or multi-choice answer will be saved here. So regardless of whether it's a list of choices that they can select or a single, we're still going to use one field that is set up as a list. If it's a single select, this will always just be a list of one item, and that works so that we don't have to have more fields to work with here. All right, so now let's move into the design area for this. So I have, again, my group main, my primary element. This is going to have some text here to display the survey's name. Notice we're referencing the current page survey. We have current page because at the page level, we did set the type of content to survey. We also have the current page survey's welcome message. And then we have these 3 different groups down below. The user will either look at the start screen, I called it group begin, where they can enter in their email name and the button, or they will be looking at the question screen. This is where they'll spend most of their time. Okay, so this has a lot of other hidden stuff within it we'll take a look at. Or they'll be finished and they'll see this complete group. Okay, so those are sort of the 3 stages that they'll be in. So starting with the begin, I have my custom inputs that I wanted to have in my design, and then my begin survey button. So when they click on this, this is going to create the response summary, right? This kicks things off. So we'll capture the email, the name, we'll start the status off as in progress, and we'll also make sure the summary is tied to the pages survey. And we're also going to pass over a reference to this new response summary record to my group main. Okay, this is a display data action. Data to display is the result of step 1. So group main over here, note that the type of content is response summary. There's really 2 primary records that we'll need to be referencing all throughout the question recording, or I should say the answer recording, which is number 1, the survey, and number 2, the response summary, because we have to have relationships to both of those things every time the user answers a question. So at the page level, we have a reference to the survey, and at the group main level, we have a reference to the response summary. This is unique to this participant's taking of this survey. Now, how do the groups hide and show? Well, we're going to be looking at whether that group main has that summary response data source or not. So group begin is hidden by default, right? This checkbox is not checked. And in the condition, we can see that when group main's response summary is empty, group begin is visible, right? Because if it's empty, that means they haven't created anything. That means they need to start here to click the button to create the record. And then if we go over to group questions over here, this becomes visible when the parent group's response summary, parent group being the group main, when it's not empty and the response summary status is not submitted. Okay, in other words, it is currently in progress because group complete is going to be visible when the response summary status is submitted. Okay, so we want to make sure that you have unique conditions so that only one of these groups shows at a time. Okay, group complete is also very simple. It just has our custom message for the thank you. So let's take a look at the group questions. So I have several elements here. I have a progress bar. This is actually coming from a Bubble plugin. It's the only plugin we have installed here. Free plugin by Bubble called Progress Bar, really easy to set up. All this needs is a percentage value here, and it will animate, and fill the bar with your colors based on that number. So for my logic here, I'm going to be referencing the repeating group that's down below. That's going to navigate me through each question one by one. So we've got a one by one list, right? One row by one column. I'm only looking at one record at a time, which means that the repeating group's page number is equivalent to the question number, right? In this case. So if I'm on the first cell, I'm looking at question number 1, that's page number 1. I navigate to the next cell, I'm looking at question number 2, that's page number 2. So if I take the page number and then divide it by the survey's number of questions, right? Surveys, related questions count, and then multiply by 100 so that I have a whole percentage value versus a decimal, then that's how far into the entire survey I'm at, right? So if I'm on page number 5 out of 10 total questions, that should give me a 0.5. Multiply by 100, I have 50, right? This is 50%, so the progress bar will be halfway colored in. All right, I'm also rounding to 0 because sometimes our divisions won't be whole numbers, so we want to make it nice and easy for the display here. Okay, so there's our progress bar. So now our repeating group. So the repeating group, like I said, we're only going to see one question at a time. Type of content is question. The source is the current pages surveys list of questions, right? The related questions. Very important to sort it by that custom sort order. Okay, because that's the admin dictating the order of questions there. All right, so inside of the repeating group, we have another group here to help us with just padding and spacing and stuff. But notice all of these different hidden groups here. These are only going to be visible based on the question type. So the first thing I have here is my group with the actual question itself. This is the question content. And I do have my hidden text here to display required only if the question is actually required. So the condition to make this visible is if the question's required is yes. Remember, that's that yes or no field on the question data type. Okay. And then down below, I have all of my possible answer elements. So we've got our single input right here, which is only going to be visible if the question's type is single text. Then we have our multi-line, only if it's multi-line. Then we have our scale here, and I've grouped my slider with a text so that the user can actually see what the value is. Okay, so I have those two things side by side, but this group overall is only visible when the type is scale. This slider here, I've set it up as a single slider rather than a range, and the minimum and maximum values for the slider is going to come from the questions min and max. Okay, that's why we wanted to record those details, and we give the admin the ability to set their scale. Okay, and then the text here is just displaying the slider input's value. So it in real time shows you where the slider is. Then down below that, we have our repeating group for displaying the possible answer choices. This is for both single select and multi-select, right? There is our condition to make this visible. So the repeating group type of content is answer choices. Our data source is the questions related answer options. Remember, all of this is one repeating group cell. Everything that we see here in this center area. Okay, and so for every cell for this repeating group, I have a button here for the user to click. It'll display the actual content. We have a specific design so that it looks sort of deselected, and then in the condition we'll change the appearance so that it looks selected, very obvious to the user that it's selected. So how do we keep track of the selections? We're going to be using a custom state for this. On group main, I have a custom state called selected choices. This is a list of answer options. Again, if we're working with a single select, this is always just going to be a list of one. Okay, so this is probably our most complex piece of logic here for this entire page. So let's go into the workflows for clicking on this button. right? So I have 4 workflows here for this button. I'm going to start with the blue workflows, which are for the single choice question type. Okay, I'm going to start with this one down here. If the user clicks on this button, and only under this scenario, if the answer options questions type is single choice, right? We want the question type. So from the answer option, we go to the related question to look at the type. And if it's single choice and our custom state of selected choices is not the current cells option, right? The first item, because it would only be one item for single choice. If the custom state's first item is not the current cells, then that means we are changing our selection to this current cell. Either it hasn't been selected yet, or we're switching from one answer to another, right? This is single choice. So if it's not, then we're going to set the state of selected choices to whatever that cell's option is, and then convert it to a list. Because this custom state isn't a list structure, we need to tell Bubble, we need to give Bubble a list ultimately, even if it's a list of 1. Okay, so this is in the scenario where the question is single choice and we click the button for the first time for this question, or we're changing our answer to something else. Now this other version here is if we are wanting to deselect it. So same scenario, except if the first choice and only choice in the custom state is already the current cell's answer option, then we are going to clear the custom state. We just leave this empty. Okay. Now for multiple choice, slightly different. So, if the question type is multiple choice and the custom state doesn't contain this answer, because they could have multiple selections. So if that list, selected choices, doesn't contain the cells option, we're going to add it to the list. So we'll take the group mains selected choices, it's the existing list, plus the current cells option. We're adding it to the list. This other workflow is the opposite to remove. So if the list already contains, then that means I'm deselecting it. So I want to take the existing list and simply subtract that option out, and I leave the rest in there still. Okay, so this custom state is going to keep track of what we've chosen. And now in the design for this button, going back to the condition here, when the group mains selected choices contains the current cell's choice, then we change the visibility here. All right. Okay, now let's move into the continue button for actually recording all of these responses. So here we have several different workflow actions for this. First thing is we're going to create the response item. We'll save all of the details about that particular response to that one question. We have the summary from group main, we have the question, which is the parent of our continue button, and we have our 2 possible answer choices. We're going to handle the number for the scale in a separate action. I'll explain why in a second here, but the choices is going to be the value of the custom state that I just went over. Okay, so we're going to use a set list action to the custom state. And then the text is going to be either the single text input or the multi-line input. So I'm doing this in one single field here by going to the input single text value, defaulting to, this is just an operator, defaulting to the multi-line. What defaulting means is that if the item that came before it, so in this case the single value, if this is empty, then it will fall back on the multi-line. So either way, because the user can only do one at a time per question, so either way one of these will fill in here. And then of course relating the item back to the pages survey. So the second item, second action I should say, is only going to apply if the question is a scale, and here we'll save the slider inputs value to that number field. The only reason I'm doing this in a separate action is because the slider, the way that the element works is no matter what, by default, it's actually always going to have a number saved to it, and I believe that number is 0. So we don't want to create any confusion for saving this response. So we actually only want to record a number here if the question truly is a scale. Otherwise, if it's not, we want to leave this field empty to make it a little bit, make it make more sense, be accurate with our data recording, okay? Now for step 3, we're going to add our new response item created in step 1 to the response summary. This is a list field here. Response items is going to add the result of step 1. And then all of these other actions here are for resetting and moving the user to the next question. So these are all visual changes here. So we're going to reset the inputs. We're going to clear the custom state for the selected choices. And then we have 2 possible actions. Only one of these will run depending on whether there's still one more question to go to, or at least one more, or if they're ready to complete the survey. So here we're going to trigger a custom state. You can see in green here called, not a custom state, sorry, a custom event, workflow event that I've called complete survey. This is only going to happen if the repeating group of questions is on the last page. This is actually a built-in state that Bubble has for us with repeating group elements. So, and that's just a yes or no value. So if yes, we're on the last page, then that means we've answered the last question. And so we're going to move into the completion, which means we will make changes to the summary. We'll say, okay, the status is now submitted, we're done, and we'll timestamp the submission date. That's just the current date and time. And then we'll also update the survey to recount the number of responses now that this has been submitted. And that number of responses displays on the admin page. It's just data for the admin. Okay, so that's if they're completely done. When there are still questions, so in other words, the repeating group last page is no, we're going to run the show next action. So this is just a repeating group action over here to move to the next cell. And this action really only works if you have a fixed repeating group, which we do. We have a 1 by 1, right? Fixed one row, fixed one column. And so it will automatically update the cell to the next question. You have it sorted in the right order that the admin dictated. And so they start the process all over again. They, either select their choices or they will type in their text and everything gets saved here. The only other workflow here is if the user happens to load the page and there is no survey sent into it, right? The current page survey is empty, then it's just going to kick them out and move them back to the index page. Because if there's no survey sent, there's nothing to do on the screen and it's really just going to be broken for them. So you want to prevent that by navigating them back to some page that's going to help them start over. The last item here is looking at a few conditions we have on the continue button. This is going to help us both enforce the required question and also show us a change where it says finish if we are on the last one. So let's go over to the conditions. We've got 6 of them here. The first one is very simple. If the repeating group is on the last page, then we can change the appearance of that to say finish, change the background color. You can see that, right? It's in green, nice little visual cue for the user. The rest are all related to the required question. So here's a first example. If the question required is yes, and the question's type is single text, and you can see that the single text value is empty, right? I said that out of order, but just to explain it, right? If it is a required question and the type is single text and the single text value is empty, then this button is not clickable. And we do the same logic for all of the other question types. You just have to check the input that you need for that type of question. And only if the question is required, you make the button not clickable. That prevents them from moving forward. This button also has a style applied to it. I'm going to go edit this default style here under the conditions where as a part of the style, if the button isn't clickable, it's going to take the opacity down to about 25%. So it looks a little bit more transparent. So it's just another visual cue that they cannot click on that button until they answer the question. All right, so we're about to close the loop here on our survey features. You've got a system in place for admins to create and manage all of their surveys, and you have a system for users to take the survey and actually record their responses. So now we need to share those responses back with the survey creators so that they can see everything that's coming in and make decisions from there. Let's take a look. Now it's time to look at all of our survey responses. So again, this is on the admin page. This is the other view that we have here. So the first screen is just a list of all of the submitted or reviewed responses. So this is anything that is completed. It's no longer in progress. I can filter this view by specific survey. So I can go to only the program participation or only the feedback. We don't have any for those. Only satisfaction. I can reset over here on the right. I can also filter down by status. So if it helps me to filter out everything that is already reviewed, that way I can go through the ones that I still need to look at. And then I can also filter by email address. So let's take Monica because we can see that she's done a couple of these here, right? And so this shows us the 2 different surveys that Monica has submitted. We also have a shortcut to this screen here. If we go to the surveys and then click on the responses button, this will take us over to this view as well and automatically choose that survey in the drop down. So it is filtered for us. So it's a nice little shortcut for the user. Okay, so we are looking at the completion date, obviously the name of the survey, the user's info, and then their status here. Let's take a look at the one that we just put together from George. I'm going to click on view. This will take me to our other view that we have here on this admin screen, which is the response detail. So very similar in concept with survey list and survey detail. We have response list and response detail. So I have the general information about the participant at the top, and then all of the responses, organized by the questions down below. So the question is in bold, and then we have the custom response right below it. If the user, the admin, is done with this, they can mark it as reviewed, right? This is in green, shows us the alert message, go back to the list, and we can see over here the status has changed. All right, so let's jump into the editor so that you can see how that came together. For the response list, we're looking at another table here. This is type of content is response summary. Those are the parent records. The data source is the search for response summaries, and we have all of the different possible constraints that the user can filter with these various inputs up at the top. So the related survey can come from the dropdown. The status can also come from the second dropdown, but we do have another status constraint to make sure that we only show response summaries that are not currently in progress. And then as long as the email contains a portion of whatever the user typed into this field, this can also help us with our search results. It is important to check this box at the very bottom to ignore empty constraints, because if the user doesn't want to filter the list, then Bubble essentially exclude those constraints from the search altogether. It's as if they aren't even included here. And then we're going to sort by the creation date. This might make a little bit more sense to sort by the submission date, though. I'm going to change that right there so that the newest is at the top. Okay. Then inside of the table, we're just displaying all the details. We've got the submission date, the survey name, the information about the participant, so their first name and their email address. These are all coming from the summary records. We have the status with a little bit of a conditional change here, just a visual cue for the user. Change it to green if the status is reviewed, and then our buttons to trigger our functions here. Now, up at the top for our drop downs, the survey is just pulling from all the possible surveys in the system. Of course, you can add constraints depending on the different permissions you want to give your user. We have it sorted alphabetically. This is going to display the survey's name as the caption, and it will default to our only other custom state that we have on this admin page. This is specifically for that shortcut process, right? So again, if the user, if the admin is coming from the surveys list view like this, and they click on the responses for a specific one, it's setting a custom state to keep track of that selected survey so that this dropdown can default to it. So in our workflow, in my navigation folder here, this is that button click from the survey list table, and we're setting two states actually. First is the tab, so they're automatically taken to the list view because right now they're in the survey list. And then also our second custom state called selected survey. The type of value for this is just our survey data type, and we're going to send the current row survey. So this value is what's set up as a default for this dropdown. If the user's not coming from that screen, then the custom state will be empty. Therefore, this default is also going to be empty. Okay, our status is coming from our response status option set. We are excluding the in progress status. So we're taking all of the status choices minus the in progress. We don't want our admin to choose that because we're filtering them out anyway. The email address is just a regular input, and then we have an icon here to reset everything. We'll go through this reset action here. So reset group filters is just going to clear all of those inputs. This would actually be a really good place to clear out that custom state as well. This is again on group main, and then for the selected survey, just empty that out altogether. So this is what we will get with that slight change here. On the surveys list, I'll click on responses for program participation. We see that there. And if I click on this button, we can see that goes away. So it fully resets me. Deleting a response is going to be kind of a mini version of the mass delete that we looked at earlier when deleting a summary, an entire survey. This is going to show another pop-up just to confirm that this is what we want to do, and it will pass data over to that pop-up. It'll send the response summary from the row. So again, it'll say, are you sure you want to do this? The no button will just hide the pop-up, nothing changes. Clicking on yes is going to delete both the list of response items for this summary, right? This is a list of records, and then finally the summary itself. All right, now for this view button, this is going to do two things for us. We're going to set the state to move us to the response detail group, right? That's the tab there. And then we're also going to pass data to the response detail group, just like we did with survey detail. So this is sending in the current row's response summary. So let's open up that detail group. I'm going to hide my response list. Open up response detail. This is very minimal. It's just showing us the answers that the user gave us. Okay, so this group type of content is response summary. This is how we can get to all of the answers because it has all of the relationships that we need. And then down below here, I have my user details just listed out, first name, email, their submission date in a single text here. And then I have a repeating group down below. So this type of content is response item, and then the data source is the parent summaries list of items, right? Design-wise, it does look like we're looking at a list of questions, but the better data source to reference is the list of response items, because that also has a relationship to the question, and we can get to everything we need from this data source here. Notice that I am not doing a search here. I don't need to. I have a relationship to all the records. I need specifically kind of like a shortcut from that summary record. So inside of that group, I have my text to display the question plus the number just for organization purposes, especially if you have a lot of questions in a survey. So we're showing the index, basically the position in the list. So index 1 is question 1, index 2 is question 2, and so on. And then we have the items, related questions, content, right? This is why it's so important to have all of these relationship fields in your data structure. The items, related questions, content. That's just the question itself. Then we have all of our conditional text depending on the type of question. So I have one for text value, one for number value, and one for my choices. So these are all hidden by default, and depending on the responses value field having a value or not, right? If it's not empty, then it becomes visible. So this is just going to display that field's value for text, number, and then choices. This is just a comma separated list of any multi-select choice that they want for that type of question. And then the final function here is just marking a summary as reviewed. So this workflow is going to modify the summary record, change the status to reviewed, and show an alert message. All right, there you have it. I hope this was helpful in walking you through a custom survey feature or any kind of dynamic form system in your Bubble application. And if it was, take a look at the content you're about to see on the next screen. It's going to help you take things even further.